Morning, students. I am Dr. Vijay Bhandari. So let's start with the difference between two-tier and three-tier architectures, advantages of dbms. So we will see here difference between two-tier and three-tier architecture, advantages of database systems, and then I will conclude the lectures at the last. So here, first we will see the differences between the two-tier and three-tier architectures. In last lectures, we have seen also the architecture of DBMS where we have covered two-tier and three-tier architectures. So here, especially uh, some students having questions about what is the difference between the two-tier and three-tier architecture. That's why I have prepared this PPT for you. So let's start. So here we will see difference between the two-tier and three-tier database architectures. Okay, so after the explanation of two-tier and three-tier, so you might understanding about the difference between two-tier and three-tier architectures. So firstly, in two-tier, the application's logic is either inside the user interface, on the client, or within the database on the server. Okay, right? So with two-tier client-server architectures, the user system interface is usually located in the user's desktop environment, and the database management services are usually in a server that is more powerful machines that services many clients, right? In other aspects, three-tier database architectures, the application's logic or process lives in the middle tier. It is separated from the data and the user interface. Three-tier systems generally are more scalable, robust, and flexible in comparison to tier architectures. In addition, they can integrate data from multiple sources, right? In the three-tier architectures, a middle layer was added between the user systems interface, client environment, and a database management servers environment, right? There are a variety of ways of implementing this middle tier, such as transaction processing monitors, messaging servers, or messages servers, or application servers. Okay, so hope so you are understanding difference between the two-tier and three-tier architectures by through this diagram. In this diagram, firstly, in two-tier, it is a client-server architectures. You can see in this diagram into two-tier, the application's logic is either inside the users. Okay, as we can see in this diagram. Another side, three-tier, you can see it is a web-based applications. In three-tier, the application's logics or process. Okay. Second difference in two-tier, interface on the client or within the database on the server or both. We can see in this diagram. And at the other side in three-tier, it resides in the middle tier. It is separated from the data and the user interface, as we can see in this diagram. We talk about the two-tier architectures consisting two layers, client layer and the database can communicate directly. But in three-tier, client layer, business layer, and the data layer. As we see in this figure, there is a business layer like applications layer, IIS, Apache, and GNIX, ASP.NET, Rails, Java, EE, so many is there. And fourth one, it builds and maintains two-tier architectures, runs slower, it is less secure also as comparison to three-tier architecture. But in three-tier architecture, it is very complex to build and maintain. But three-tier architecture runs faster as compared to two-tier. It is more secure as a client is not allowed to communicate with database directly. So it results in performance loss whenever the system is run on internet, but gives more performance than two-tier architectures. But in two-tier architectures, it results in performance loss whenever the user increases rapidly. We can take an example of this two-tier architecture like a contact management system created using MS Access or railway reservation systems. But in three-tier, we can take an example of designing registrations form which contains text box, label, buttons, or large websites on the internet. So this is the difference between the two-tier and three-tier architectures. Now we will see in the next slide advantages of dbms. Okay, so firstly I will compare with the file-based management systems. Database management systems has many advantages. Some of these advantages are given below. So first is reducing data redundancy. So in this we see the database management systems is explained as the software systems that allow users to define, create, maintain, and control access to the database. Of course, DBMS makes it possible for end users to create, read, update, and delete data in database. It is a layer between programs and data. Okay, right? And if we compare to the file-based data management system and database management system has many advantages. Some of these advantages like reducing data redundancy. So here this is prevented in the database as there is a single database and any changes in it is reflected immediately. Because of this, there is no chances of encountering duplicate data. So we can say the file-based database management systems contained multiple files that were stored in many different locations in a systems or even across multiple systems. Because of this, there were sometimes multiple copies of the same file which lead to data redundancy. Okay, so this is called reducing data redundancy. In next slide we will see sharing of the data. So many remote users can also access the database simultaneously and sharing the data between themselves. Because of in a database, the users of the database can share the data among themselves, and there are various levels of authorizations to access the data, and consequently the data can only be shared based on the correct authorizations protocols being followed. Now we will see the data integrity is the another important advantages of DBMS. So data integrity means the data is accurate and consistent in the database. It is very important as there are multiple databases in the DBMS. All of these databases contains data that is visible to multiple users. Now we can say it is very necessary to ensure that the data is correct and consistent in all the database and for all the users. Right? Now we will see data security. Another most important example of advantages of data security. Data security is vital concept in the database. Only authorized users should be allowed to access the database and their identity should be authenticated using a username and password. Unauthorized users should not be allowed to access the database under any circumstances as it violates the integrity constraints. Right? So data security, only authorized users should be allowed to access the database and their identity should be authenticated. Now in next slide we will see privacy. Privacy is another important advantage of DBMS. So we will see here the privacy. Privacy rules in the database means only the authorized users can access a database according to its privacy constraints. There are levels of database access and a user can only view the data is allowed. For example, in social networking sites, access constraints are different for different accounts a user may want to access. you want to access constraints or in social networking sites like Facebooks, Instagrams, LinkedIn. So these access constraints are different for different accounts a user may want to access. Okay. Now we'll see another good example of backup and recovery is the most important advantages of dbms. So it automatically takes care of data backup and recovery. The users do not need to backup data periodically because this is taken care of by the dbms. Moreover, we can say it is also restores the database after crashing or system failures to its previous conditions. So this is the backup and recovery. Now, seventh advantages of DBMS, that is data consistency. So data consistency is ensured in the database because there is no data redundancies and all the data appears consistently across the database and the data is same for all the users viewing the database. Now any changes made to the database are immediately reflected to all the users and there is no data inconsistency. So finally we can say these seven advantages of these are the seven advantages of DBMS. Hope you understand. If any doubt, so you can ask me. Okay. So thank you. Today we have seen the differences between the two-tier and three-tier DBMS architecture and advantages of DBMS. Thank you.